September 1944, outside Aachen, a silent hillside sprouted eyes, and when they opened, the Siegfried Line woke and tore the road apart. They had run across France and Belgium, the men of the 1st Division, past cheering crowds and broken resistance, almost faster than supply could catch them. Then everything stopped. What looked like nothing at all began to kill with impossible precision. Low mounds that seemed part of the earth, concrete the color of old stone, narrow slits that gave nothing away. Tracers crossed like measured strokes. Mortar shells walked the road as if counting their steps. Bazooka rounds sparked and died. The hills had not grown eyes. Germany had hidden them there years before. This was the western edge of the Siegfried Line. 18,000 reinforced concrete bunkers stretched 390 miles from Holland to Switzerland. Walls 5 to 8 feet thick, ceilings strengthened by rebar in deep grids. Air systems that made each chamber airtight and gas-proof behind steel doors. The design was meant to keep every poison out, every blast wave out, every breath of tainted air out. The engineers had imagined every threat coming from the world beyond the wall. They had not imagined what would happen if the threat got in. In September of 1944, no one on that road knew the paradox waiting behind 6 feet of concrete. What they knew was simple and brutal. The advance that had crossed a continent had struck a surface that artillery would scar but not crack. The pillboxes fought as a network, one every 100 yards in width and in depth, stitched into the land. Fire from the front met fire from the flank. Try to pass a bunker and you entered the sights of its neighbors. Interlocking positions turned open ground into a mechanism that sorted men by who survived the next 10 seconds. Against stone farmhouses and hedgerows, the American formula had worked. Find the position, call the guns. Suppress. Close. It failed here. 105mm shells struck and left scrapes. 155mm shells bit deeper, and still the concrete held. A tank destroyer could place perfect shots, and the machine gun inside would simply shift to the next aperture. The lesson was relentless. Do not fight a wall at the place where it is strongest. The answer began with a small discovery made under fire. Most bunkers were built to see far and to sweep ground at distance. Close in, the guns could not always depress. At 20 or 30 yards, a man could hug the concrete and vanish into a blind zone. He would feel the vibration of the gun through the stone and live. But he could not open the door. He could not force the slit. He could not pry through a vent scarcely wider than a fist. What he needed was not more power. He needed a way to turn the bunker against itself. Somewhere in mid-September, a combat engineer crawled through grass cut by machine gun fire and reached the dead space beside a firing slit. He carried a canvas bag with 8 blocks of TNT, the M37 demolition kit, 24 pounds of high explosive made for bridges and rails. No one had trained him for this. He pulled the igniter, counted, and shoved the bag into the slit. Explosives in open air shove the world aside and fade. Explosives in a sealed room do not fade. Inside a concrete box, the blast wave strikes a wall and returns. It strikes the opposite wall and returns again. It climbs the ceiling, falls to the floor, rebounds from every angle, and cannot escape because the doors and filters do their job too well. Pressure rises past pain, past breath, past life. The chamber kills its own garrison with the very strength that was meant to save them. The bunker fell silent. Not suppressed, silenced. In a single detonation, the arithmetic flipped. The thick walls that shrugged off artillery became mirrors for a blast that could not leave. The gas-proof seal that kept poison out now kept terror in. The strongest fortress became the most perfect trap. When the fight moved from the exterior to the interior. Using this truth required more than physics. It required a person to cross open ground under every gun the line could bring to bear, reach a slit no wider than a hand, and live long enough to deliver the charge. On October 8, 1944, east of Aachen, a man did exactly that. His name was Bobby Brown. He had been a soldier since he was a boy. He had landed on Omaha Beach. He had been wounded and decorated. None of that defines him as clearly as what he did on a hill the Americans called Crucifix. 43 pillboxes armored the slopes of Crucifix Hill. Brown's company faced 7 of them. Fighter bombers hit first. Smoke lifted. The apertures reopened. Crossfire pinned the riflemen to the earth. Brown asked for flamethrowers, pole charges, and satchel charges. Then he went alone. He crawled to the dead space beside Pillbox 18, found a damaged seam, and shoved a satchel charge inside. The sealed room answered like a bell. 4 stunned defenders came out with hands raised and blood at their ears. He moved to 19. A gap in a steel door became a path for a Bangalore and then for TNT. Silence again. At 20, he reached a locked door and no way in. Then a German runner opened that door to carry ammunition. Brown lunged, jammed 2 satchel charges through, and threw himself flat. The blast met stacked ammunition in a sealed chamber. Pillbox 20 ceased to exist as a fighting position. The interlocking pattern on the hill collapsed. The company took the ground. The lesson spread not by orders, but by voices. By late October, assault teams formed along the line. 5 or 6 men, suppression rifles and a bazooka to darken the slit. A movement to the blind side. TNT for a crack or a door. And then a new weakness, one the engineers had built into every bunker by necessity. Ventilation. Air kept men alive inside a sealed fortress. Air moved through shafts fitted with filters meant to stop chlorine and mustard gas. Those ducts were too small for a person. They were not too small for a grenade. A fragmentation grenade would wound and stun. A white phosphorus grenade would fill every room with searing smoke. The intake that was meant to feed breath now fed poison through every duct to every chamber. A company commander called it a great little reviver. When men retreated behind internal doors and refused to quit, the phosphorus ended debate. Then came fire. The flamethrower did not always burn the body. It burned the air. In a sealed space, jellied gasoline stripped oxygen in seconds. Some defenders were found without a mark. They had breathed death in the dark. For a brief moment, a senior officer called the weapon humane. He was wrong. Suffocation is not mercy. It is simply another way a sealed room kills the people who trusted it. Night brought the German answer, counterattacks by the clock. If a captured pillbox still stood, it would be reoccupied before dawn. The same door, the same slit. The same fight again. One commander counted 6 pillboxes taken 3 separate times because the walls still stood. The only cure was total destruction, and that demanded more TNT than many companies could carry. Nowhere cut deeper than a place the Americans named Heartbreak Crossroads. In December of 1944, the 2nd Division struck a road junction at Wallerscheid, guarded by 25 pillboxes, rows of wire, mines, and fields cleared for fire. For 2.5 days, they bled against it. In darkness, on December 15th, a patrol cut through and led a battalion behind the line. By the morning of the 16th, the crossroads lay in American hands. There was not enough explosive left to reduce the bunkers to rubble. The opening barrage of the Battle of the Bulge rose in the east. The division pulled back. The Germans reoccupied every single pillbox. Weeks later, the same ground had to be taken again. The race accelerated, mines appeared in dead spaces and along the paths assault teams used. Remote charges waited for a watcher's signal. The answer arrived on steel tracks with a blade. The tank dozer did not need to crack a wall, it needed to smother a fortress. From the blind side, a dozer pushed earth and shattered trunks over the door, across the slits, into the vent. In minutes, a bunker became a sealed tomb. The filters that kept gas out now kept oxygen out. The doors that locked from inside now locked men in. The concrete that resisted shells now held the air itself prisoner. Surrender or die in the dark. The approaches were mined and deadly. Infantry cleared as best they could. Dozers followed and finished. By March of 1945, the method had become a sequence practiced to speed. Suppress, approach, penetrate, destroy. And the standard German design revealed its last secret. The same layout repeated across a continent meant that once a man learned one bunker, he knew them all. On March 18th near Niederwurzbach, that knowledge moved with the speed of a single person. First Lieutenant Jack Treadwell advanced alone with a submachine gun and grenades across a slope that had already wounded or killed an entire team. He fired into a slit, reached the wall, and drove the defenders out. He did it again to the next bunker, and again to the next, seizing the hill commander and breaking the chain of defense. 6 pillboxes fell to one man in one continuous rush. He did not need special weapons, he needed the map the engineers had drawn into every Regelbau. The skeleton key lived in the design. The war shifted on, but the men did not leave it behind. Bobby Brown received the Medal of Honor in August of 1945. He had been wounded 13 times, fought from Omaha Beach to Aachen, and returned to his company after months in a hospital. After the war, he left the army and struggled to find a place for what war had taught him. He died in 1971. Jack Treadwell married the nurse who had cared for him, stayed in uniform, led in Vietnam, and retired as a colonel. He died in 1977 and rests in Arlington. The bunkers remain in quiet forests, moss growing over concrete that once held life and death inside its seal. Some stand open as museums. Visitors walk through steel doors and look up at the vents, trying to imagine a bag of TNT sliding into a slit, a white phosphorus grenade falling through a duct, a flamethrower nozzle filling a room with fire that eats the air. They feel the weight of a design that worked perfectly until someone stepped inside. The Siegfried Line did not fail because the Americans broke its walls. It failed because the Americans used its purpose against it. Make the bunker do what it was built to do. Contain. Then put something within worth containing. In that moment, the fortress became its own weapon, and the seal that had promised safety delivered silence.